Welcome back, everyone, to the very special fourth episode of the Enter the Inkwell podcast, the competitive Lorcana podcast, where we break down the meta and all the sick decks that are seeing play, all the tech that you should know for your next big Lorcana tournament. I'm joined here today with Aska Ragnardaughter.
With you here as always, Ren.
With me here as always. And hello, I'm Autumn Burchett. Today we're going to be breaking down DLC Ghent, a pair of DLCs that just happened over in Belgium this past weekend. 2,000 people in each tournament, so that's 4,000 people giving us deck lists, giving us data, giving us so many things to look through. It was a sick weekend. We were both there, and one of us had a pretty excellent result. Do you want to talk about your finish, Aska?
Yeah, I played Steel Purple, and I finished top 32 of the Friday bracket, so it was like the non-dogs bracket of the event, basically. The Blurple bracket, as it were. I started off 6-0, and then I turned that into a 6-2, unfortunately. But I managed to rally in 4-0 into Top Cut. And then I lost in top 32. Que sera. But it was pretty nice.
Yeah, such a sick finish. Your first ever DLC Top Cut, only your third ever DLC.
It's my first DLC day 2 and my first DLC Top Cut.
Yeah, which I think is like third DLC Top Cut, fantastic performance. You beat over 1,900 other players to get there.
Yeah.
I love the Steel Purple list that you were playing. Do you want to talk us through the details a bit and some of your thought processes behind your list and why you bought a build like this?
Super happy to. So in the lead into the event, everyone's thinking about dogs, and anecdotally, a lot of people in my vicinity are thinking about blue-green because my whole team played blue-green. So like,
Guilty as charged.
I have a very warped view of the meta at this point, but when I'm testing, I keep just talking to my friends, and they're like, I'm playing this purple deck, I'm playing this purple deck. I'm playing YP, I'm playing Blurple, you know what I mean? So, like, some of the English players are playing Blurple, so I felt like it was very important to be able to beat the other purple decks, because I expected, it's not going to be just 50% purple, it's probably going to be higher. And the meta share, as we'll see later, end up being like 60% purple. So I really thought I had to tilt the list towards the purple mirrors, which is why I played only one of each of these aggressive lore burn style cards in the Genie and the Pocahontas. And then I also played Thunderbolts, which is like a good card to fight over the sky, specifically against Blurple and in the mirror. I played 2 Iaga. Iago is phenomenal, specifically against Blurple, because not a lot of them are playing outs. I lost the only match where I played against a Blurple player with outs, so that was... I'd play him out and he would... Because, like, the right thing to do when you have in your deck is often to play it out without fear. And then I'd play it out and he'd have maneuvers, and I was like, damn it, did I have to play against the one guy with maneuvers? But I would have played maneuvers too, so I understand. So, and then I also played 4 Looking for a Deal and 4 Dumbo, because some people were still playing Isma at this tournament, so Isma is very, like, aggressive. I'm going to empty my hand, I'm going to play a bunch of cheap cards out, I'm going to draw 3, but I thought Isma was so fragile in the purple mirrors against Strength, because Dumbo and Hades can both draw a card when they enter the battlefield, because they have these effects that, if you already have a flyer in play, you draw off Dumbo, Hades has this effect immediately. So I think Elsa and, like, Let It Go, and these cards are way better against Isma, and obviously so is Hades for similar reasons. You're not always going to get a card off the Dumbo, but it's more just about how often these things play into your favor. I was super happy with my list. The one thing I would probably change if I was going to run the same metagame again is I would change the Madam Mim for a Heron. That card was not good the one time I drew it and had to play it. The thought process was that it helps attack down like Tramp 7, but it turned out to not be very good, and then it also hits under the seed if you play it out in that matchup, unlike most of your, or like a few of your other 2-drops. Robin obviously gets under the seed. But yeah, that's kind of the commentary on the list.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. I personally love what you did with the list. I tried out the kind of, I think we call it almost the Thea style build now, after her amazing result at the CCQ, and with like a lot of Pocahontases and Genie Freeze, and the build felt very good against non-purple decks, but I found myself really struggling in the purple mirrors with that build personally, and it makes a lot of sense that you would want to move away from a card like Isma back towards a card like Dumbo. You'd want these tools like Iago and Thunderbolt that are phenomenal in purple mirrors, and then maxing out in Hades is, I think, one of the very best things you could have done for your purple mirrors. That card is so impressive in any grindy matchup. So I really love how this list looks. It's not surprising. You had such a good performance with it. Do you want to like talk about your matchups at all, or should we just move on and talk about DLC Ghent as a whole?
I mean, I can talk about my matchups. I had on day one, I think I played Blurple 4 times. I think it was 4 times in a row too, where I went 2-2 against Blurple. Where the two matches I lost were like I took a game, but then I couldn't find enough card draw in either of the other games, which is why there's so much card draw in this deck, because you have to get something to get the ball rolling against Blurple. But multiple times I would find maybe one dock and it wouldn't lead me anywhere, or they could have the option to not let me draw off Hades because I didn't have enough pressure in other ways, or something. So that happened to me a couple times. But I won a mirror on day one. I beat green-purple on day one. I also beat blue-green thanks to drawing the one Genie magical researcher. That felt sick. I was like, oh, I'm so behind in this game, but because I put this one-of in my deck, I'm going to win, which felt great.
Oh, that's sick, though. That's why we play the one-ofs, right?
Yep. The Thunderbolts also single-handedly won me a game on a few matches, like on day 2. I played a mirror on day 2 in the 3rd round, so I guess overall the 11th round of the tournament. And my opponent curved out and strengthed me. So he goes 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drops. Isma strength you. And I just drew and inked and just Thunderbolted Isma, just paying 4 ink. And he just has 1 card, and he's just like, oh... that's not good, because he just has no card flow, and I can just play the control role, whereas if I didn't have a Thunderbolt, I would just be resigned to letting him draw 3, and then he probably just wins that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So little choices like that really came into question, like it came to a head all weekend, as I said, except for the Skater Mim, which I didn't enjoy. So I thought my deck building paid off immensely, because I did play 8 out of 13 on my matchups for purple decks. And then, like, the others, I think, was, like, dogs, blue, steel, blue, yellow, blue, green. Stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely one of the nice things about this game, that, like, those little tweaks and details tuning your list because of the ink system have a big effect across a tournament, because, you know, you get a lot of options and opportunities to use these cards and figure out when you want to be playing them. And it's nice to see the little one-offs and those touches paying off, because that's what it's all about when it comes to tuning these lists.
Also, the second match I played on day 2, I drew a Thunderbolts as my only out to a lethal Genie on the opponent's side. So, like, it was the gift that kept on giving, the one Thunderbolt. I felt like I had to mention it.
The single Thunderbolt is so nice. I remember playing 2 Thunderbolts in Steel Purple back in set 10. And it always felt like with 2, sometimes it would clunk your hand up a bit. But the card is so powerful that fitting in that first copy is a lot of upside.
Yeah, I was sniping cats and genies with it all weekend. It was great.
Hell yeah. Cool. So congrats on the amazing finish. Your second invite to the European Championship, just storing them up.
I'm racking them up. Also, I have an Elsa now, which I'm very happy with. It's cool to earn such a neat prize.
Oh, it's such a sick prize. The Elsa Ice Maker foil is stunning.
It's beautiful.
Such a gorgeous card.
Yeah.
Before we get into talking about the event, I should probably just give a quick mention to what I was up to. So I played blue-green. It was actually what most of my team ended up on. We're going to get to the list later because one of my teammates had a phenomenal finish with it. But I played blue-green. It's the deck I'm most comfortable with. Of course, I had a good result with it back in January, which made me feel very confident in the deck. Didn't have the best tournament. Ended up finishing 4-3 after a 3-0 start. I do think one of those matches I maybe could have eked out if I'd been playing at 100%, but very obscure line that I ended up missing. Still, it's nice to see the deck building pay off in Bernardo, one of our teammates, having a amazing finish with blue-green.
That's our boy, Jay Bernardo.
Indeed. Moving forward, I'm definitely looking to diversify and just play a bunch of different decks for the next tournament and not feel, locked into anything specific. Because I do think, even though one of our teammates had a good finish with blue-green, I don't think it was the best choice for this past weekend. And I definitely like to have the flexibility to pick up, say, a purple steel list like this or a blurple list or whatever, depending on what's right for the weekend.
Yeah, and what you feel is correct. Because from my perspective, I only ever really considered playing steel, purple, and dogs. Mm-hmm. And I think the only reason, to be honest with you, that I didn't play dogs is because I couldn't have my heart broken again, like in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I know there's actually nothing rational about that. It was just more like, okay, I was ruined there because I bricked horribly. I'm just going to play a deck that's probably going to bring me very close to the same result, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable. It sounds a bit irrational from a certain perspective, but from another perspective, mental game is really important. And if playing dogs, you're going to have these fears of, okay, I just don't want to brick again like I did in Hong Kong. I don't want to have these bad draws and these bad matchups. That's going to have you on edge and not playing your best. Whereas purple steel, it's like a fresh slate. You get to start over.
I get to play the deck that I have my best result with, and I get to play probably the best purple steel list at the event. And I felt that made me feel really good, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good for your mental game and for your focus. So I honestly think, people might look at you saying you didn't want to have your heart broken with dogs again and find it a bit strange, but I think it's the right call. You have to have the good mental game, and if that's the thing that's going to help you have the mental game, having a different deck, then that's what you need to do.
I'm such a confidence-based player that I feel like I have to have a baseline amount of confidence coming into an event. Which is actually why I didn't play blue-green as well, even though I thought the deck was solid.
Yeah.
Just knowing the lines is one thing and feeling the lines is another, but having the confidence to do the right thing every time, that was where I was a little okay, I don't know, right?
Oh, absolutely. Having that confidence just means you're able to trust your decision-making a lot more and not have to question yourself during the games, which I think is huge. So let's get into the metagame. Definitely worth breaking down the metagame a bit before we start looking at deck lists in earnest. So first of all, going to look at metagame percentages for the Friday and Saturday events, then conversion rates for Friday and Saturday, and then finally a breakdown of the top 32, everything that made it. So here we have the Friday metagame. We see 26% Amethyst Steel, 23% Blurple, 15% Dogs, 7% Blue-Green, 7% Blue Steel, and then nothing else really cracking past 6% in the rest of the field. So very clearly defined 5 most popular decks. The things I find really interesting looking at this, Amethyst Steel overtaking Blurple, which I think is probably in part because of the expected amount of dogs, and that I would much rather be playing Amethyst Steel against dogs than Blurple. I think Blurple has to tech a lot to make that matchup palatable, whereas Amethyst Steel doesn't have to tech quite as much. I think it's notable that there isn't more dogs, despite it being the talk of the town. And then there's a lot of blue-green, and blue-green's quite popular here in Europe. I think a lot more of the European players were playing Friday, a lot more of the American players were playing Saturday, so...
Which is kind of funny. I thought it would be the other way around with the divide of UK, or like EU/US players. I thought they would be more likely to stay longer and play on Friday, but apparently it played out the other way around, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I wonder if it wasn't people adjusting for jet lag and wanting that extra day of good sleep.
That could easily be the case, yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of blue-green, because blue-green's very popular here in Europe compared to the US. Anything notable about this metagame to you?
Oh, I thought it was really interesting that we had so much purple, because this is still a bit more than I expected when I made my deck building decisions that I went over earlier. But I guess we are in Europe. We want to play mid-range. We want to play purple cards. And we also want to play blue-green. I feel like that's what we're known for, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And, dogs 14% on this tournament, despite probably being the best deck. It, or like close to. Even if you think it's only as good as Amethyst Steel, you do start to ask the question of why it wasn't played in the same amount as Amethyst Steel. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think people have overstated quite how tough Dogs is to play now. Nowadays, it's a bit easier to play because Willow is so strong. And maybe people were scared of the deck. Or maybe people just wanted to play their purple decks. We see 60% of the meta is purple here. And something I find very interesting is some of these more fringe decks even have good representation. We see 5% Amber Steel, 4% Amber Sapphire, 4% Amethyst Ruby. There are a bunch of decks putting up pretty solid amounts of the field outside of the top decks as well.
Yeah, I mean, the metagame looks pretty diverse, right? When we look at this sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think like dogs should probably be more represented in like a field where everyone is trying to maximize their win rate. Most people don't have the excuse I did for this event, right? But at the same time, I think people clearly just gravitate away from it, right? They don't seem to want to play this style of deck, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, whereas, like, the flip side, we see a lot of the purple players willing to move off of Blurple onto Amethyst Steel.
Yep.
Which is, it's interesting that some aspects we see a lot of flexibility.
Or even, like, Amethyst Yellow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Looking at the... Well, let's look at the meta for... Oh my gosh, sorry, slides a sec. Let's take a quick look at the Saturday meta, because I think this is probably the next thing to lead on to. We see, again, Amethyst Steel, the most popular deck. Again, Blurple, second most popular at 24% and 20% respectively. Dogs are a lot more popular on Saturday. Dogs has an 18% portion of the meta, a few extra percentage points there. Probably because the American players are more drawn to Dogs and there were more Americans on Saturday.
Yep.
And then we see, again, Blue-Green 8%, Amber Amethyst overtaking Sapphire Steel at 6%, and then a handful of other decks, again, scattered around the field. Very similar story, except some of that Blurple being replaced with some more Dogs, really.
Yep. It's, I don't know. I don't have that much to say about the different breakdown. We got slightly more Dogs and slightly less Blurple, right?
Yeah. Looking at the conversion rates today too, we see Dogs had the best conversion rate from the Friday main event at 22% conversion, over a fifth, nearly a quarter of the Dogs players in day one made day two. We see Blurple second place, 18% conversion, and then really just a lot of Purple converting very well. Amber Amethyst, Amethyst Emerald, Amethyst Steel, all of these having very solid conversion rates, and then the non-purple decks really lagging behind. I'm actually just going to, before we get into this, quickly go over the conversion for Saturday as well, where we see Amethyst Steel having the best conversion rate at 18%, Dogs at 17%. And then I find this very funny. Amethyst Ruby, 16% conversion. So I think I know what's up here.
I also think I know what's happening here, yes.
There's more dogs playing in Saturday, which means more of these Amethyst Ruby players and Amethyst Steel players are getting to queue into dogs. And so we see these challenging base strategies with their Calhouns or their Headless Horsemen having much better conversions as a result.
I do think that it's kind of funny. I think Dogs is probably on average still favored against both of these decks, but I do think you have to be a very skilled Dogs player for that to be true. And this did have an impact on me, but how I built my deck going into the tournament. Like, I was like, oh, if I play, what are the chances of me playing against someone who considers themselves favored against Purple Steel on Dogs? In, like, considering there's so few players that are so talented with Dogs that they can beat those decks consistently. So I do think this meta share is an example of the Amethyst Ruby and Amethyst Steel players got to take advantage of weaker Dogs players to get to day 2 and, you know, have those conversion rates be really good. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And yeah, I agree with that completely. Like, the best Dogs players in the room are probably favored against the vast majority of Amethyst Steel players, is my opinion. But
I agree.
Your average Dogs player, absolutely not. Your average Dogs player is not going to be favored against a good Amethyst Steel player or a good Amethyst Ruby player.
And also, like, if you're the same skill level as your Amethyst Ruby or Amethyst Steel opponent, like, relatively speaking, I think that player is going to be ahead in the matchup.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. A little thing I would like to note before we move on, that Amber Ruby, we're not going to get to talk about this deck properly because it didn't top 32, and we already have a lot of deck lists to talk through, but Amber Ruby had a weirdly good tournament. We see a 12% conversion here, and that's because of this Amber Ruby Webby's Diary control deck that has popped up.
Oh, you minimized your stream. I do not see it at the moment.
Oh, I don't have it open at the moment.
Excellent.
Is why.
There you go. Thank you.
But I just wanted to know, interesting to see Amber Ruby putting up good conversion.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really, like, considering there were so few of them, it's cool that a couple of them made it. And
yeah,
very cool deck.
Right, before we start talking about deck lists, quick breakdown of the top 32s. I have the combined results here, where across the two top 32s, so essentially a pseudo top 64, if you will, we see 22 Dogs players, 14 Blurple players, 11 Amethyst Steel players, 6 Yerple players, 5 Blue-Green, 2 Amber Steel, and then a Blue Steel, an Amethyst Ruby, a Sapphire Amber, I will never get used to the naming conventions in this game, and a Grapple Amethyst, Emerald Amethyst, right? Grapple.
Yeah.
Player. And a Partridge and a Pear Tree. So, lots of Dogs converting to the top. Obviously, lots of Blurple and Amethyst Steel too. I think it's notable that Yerple was overperforming, perhaps because it's winning against a lot of these other Amethyst decks. But really, the talk of the town is Dogs. Dogs is over a third of these top 32s. Astonishing performance, really. And here we have the champions list. Zan Syed won the grand final between the two DLC winners. Zan Syed won with Dogs after talking for a couple weeks now about how broken Dogs is. And
he did put his money where his mouth is, which I respect.
Yeah, he put his money where his mouth is. Like, if you talk about how broken a deck is and that everyone should be playing it, and then you come along to a tournament and go 1-3 bit embarrassing. You come along and win the tournament, maybe you have a point. You know?
Yeah. I agree, 100%.
This dog's list, pretty standard in many regards. We see, the four Under the Sea, 2 Emerald Chromacon, really going up on Under the Sea numbers because of mirror matches, I have to assume. Probably there are 2 details here that stand out to me as maybe a bit unconventional. The first is that he's playing 4 copies of Lady Elegant Spaniel, which is a card that's really lost a lot of popularity over the past month or so as these lists have become more tuned. And to me, looking at this Lady Elegant Spaniel indicates to me that maybe Zan's interested in these Shift Lady Under the Sea lines in the mirror and being able to do that on turn 3 more reliably.
Yeah, so this is information I know from the Dogs players I know at the event, where some of them were just interested in keeping Under the Sea in their opening hand. And then if you do that, so I don't know what Zan was doing, full disclosure, but if you do keep Under the Sea in your opening hand, accepting the risk that it gets discarded by your opponent's Ursula, you do have the option that if you draw your Lady one, and this plays 8 Lady ones to facilitate that. If you draw your Lady Shift and your Lady one, it's pretty trivial to sing a very fast Under the Sea as soon as turn 3. And I think that might be what this list is trying to maximize. That the fact that you have the uninkable Lady as an extra shift target in the early game.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Being able to maximize those UTS lines in the mirror. And then in order to accommodate the Lady, we actually see no Daisy Duck, because Daisy Duck is a card that is really embarrassing in the mirror match specifically.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you want to play Elegant Spaniel, you need the unink space.
I also think it's kind of cool to see, so a lot of the time when I've built around Mickey Ember Champion, I've kind of obsessed with putting as many yellow characters in my deck as possible, but we don't really see that here. He's just playing the Mickey, and some characters are going to get buffed by it,
Yeah, just playing the Mickey as a good card that sometimes is going to, work with your characters. And of course, the inking system means if you draw the Mickey and you don't have many Amber characters, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can ink the Mickey.
I also imagine Finnick, which is a really unique choice, is specifically here to disrupt your opponent singing Under the Sea in the mirror. Functionally giving yourself another turn to not get Under the Sea.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that, because you can bounce your opponent's Mickeys. If they have a Tramp 7, you could bounce that too. Obviously, you don't love giving your opponent another draw and discard, but if it buys you a turn to have your Under the Sea ready, you don't care if they get another draw and discard.
You can also bounce your opponent's Willow, which seems kind of nice.
True. Bounce back the unink, force them to spend ink casting it again in order to develop.
Exactly.
Yeah. Finnick is a very interesting inclusion. It's not a card I generally have a very high opinion of, but I can see the dynamics where it might actually be really appealing in these mirror matches.
I imagine there is also a universe where sometimes you're playing against one of the purple decks and you kind of get over the line by bouncing their, in a scrappy game, you bounce something that they need.
Yeah.
To contest your board or race you or something.
Also, a cool thing about Finnick in this list, with 4 copies of Moon Lullaby and 4 copies of Rhino, of course you're playing those cards to synergize with Under the Sea and wipe your opponent's board. But there are going to be times where you can use Moon Lullaby to shrink a pretty hefty creature and then still bounce it with Finnick.
Yeah, that's true.
So really impressive piece of deck building here from Zan Syed. Congrats to him for getting that wild slot and crushing the DLCs, plural. Looking at other dogs lists, this one I just wanted to take a quick look at. It's nothing special, but it was the other DLC winner. And so I thought it worth noting, taking a quick look at this list and seeing, we see the 2 Elegant Spaniels again, interest in the shift lines.
There's more Go-Go's in this one more than, there's Go-Go's to begin with in this list, where Zan doesn't have any.
Yeah. This, Dada one, definitely playing, pretty conventional dogs list here, but taking down a DLC with it, which is very impressive. Looking at more interesting dogs lists. So I actually faced this list in Swiss. I faced this opponent in Swiss. They were my second loss on day one. And they ended up, I believe, top 8ing the Friday flight of the DLC. And this list is crazy. This list has so much going on. It's Circle of Life dogs, where we see a lot of the normal dogs cards. We see the Tramp 7, the Lady 5, the early plays like Bobby and Lady 1 and Rhino, Willow, Lilo, Mowgli. But we also see Circle of Life, which here is getting back Stitch, Carefree Surfer, and the Shift Tramp that protects your board amazingly against a deck like Amethyst Steel. And we still see Under the Seas as well, and help support these 8-cost sing-togethers. We not only have the tramps like you normally would, we even have a copy of Jumba Jukuba, kind of as an extra tramp, almost.
Yeah, something you can use with your Willows, and you can go wide, and then you can play this, and then it solo sings in Under the Sea or a Circle of Life.
Yeah, and like Jumba Jukuba is a card that I honestly find pretty compelling. Like, I think this is a hefty lad, you know?
Yeah.
He sings well, he's hard to remove.
I imagine he could be a card going forward that could be quite interesting in the mirror, because you could try to go around the fact that your opponent has Under the Sea by just having the biggest guy.
Yeah, and then they sing Under the Sea and your Jumba gets to eat one of their things.
And then if they happen to have the Tramp too, then you maybe still lose, but then you still went 2-for-1 on the Jumba and you still got to play a spell after they Under the Sea. So
yeah, there might even be times where they Under the Sea you keep your Jumba, you untap, you Under the Sea them, and now you have the only thing left on board because you had a Jumba and they did.
Yeah, because it's a 6/6 if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, it's a 4/5.
Oh,
still
that's
quite substantial.
Oh, that's so much worse. I thought it would. Now it doesn't live Lullaby UTS.
Yeah, this is the one problem with it. It doesn't live Lullaby. Is quite a problem.
Yeah, and it doesn't one-shot their Tramp after it taps. Okay. Maybe I'm less interested in it. In specifically Circle, it's nice, though.
Yeah, and specifically Circle, it has a lot of synergies going on. It is quite cool. Yeah, definitely an interesting list. A little bit of a different angle of attack from the more conventional dogs lists. There were 2 copies of this in the Top Cut across the 2 days.
Yeah, so, I sat next to, during my Top Cut game, I'm pretty sure I was sat next to the other copy of this.
Nice. Yeah. Very impressive. Very interesting from the perspective of, you know, if you're scared of item hate, you're scared of registering Chromacon, this is a way to sidestep that, right?
Yep. I agree.
So, cool list. A couple more dogs lists. This one I just wanted to very quickly highlight. It's a pretty standard Under the Sea dogs list. The one card I wanted to highlight that I thought was very interesting, we see a single copy of Lost in the Woods in this list. Of course, Lost in the Woods card we sometimes see comboed with Under the Sea in Infinity in the Diablo decks.
Yep.
So cool seeing a copy here that you can sing off your Mickeys or your Tramps. And then the final list. So this is a cool one. This is an Under the Sea Dogs list. A lot of the tools that we saw in Under the Sea Dogs, you know, earlier in this set, we see 4 Donald Duck Perfect Gentleman. We see the Mickey Mice that we've been talking about, the Clarabelle free drop. The interesting thing I wanted to note about this list, and we see 2 copies of this list in Top Cut. So a team clearly brought this, and 2 people in Top Cut, they must have done very well overall. There's no Shift Lady, which is kind of fascinating. What do you think about no Shift Lady?
I mean, it's curious, isn't it? Because Shift Lady is one of those cards, along with Chromacon, usually in combination with Chromacon, that can, like, ruin your draws, because it's, like, a high variance uninkable card.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in this deck, because of what ends up getting targeted in the mid-game, like, people play their Elsas, what do they target? Often they target Elegant Spaniel if you're playing that card. Often they target Decisive Dog, but the most important card to target is usually Grandmother Willow. So what happens sometimes is you have your Lady 5 and you have no target. And then if you've drawn a kind of a weak hand where you don't have a Willow, then the Lady 5 is worse, right? Because then it costs actually 5 ink, or it costs you the card and you have to have the shift target and you have to have Elegant Spaniel or Decisive Dog.
Yeah.
So there's a few things like working against the card, especially when you now do have access to more card advantage tools in the Nani. And this deck is like taking that to the extreme and going, let's play Clarabelle, let's play Donald Duck. I don't care about Under the Sea and Quickly, but I'm going to get there in the end. I think, I'm not sure how good this list is in the mirror. I can imagine this list being quite good against like Blurple or Purple Steel, because you have the luxury of just continuing to play threats over time.
Yeah.
But this list hates to see an Under the Sea coming. Like, I also imagine this list loses some points against Blue-Green, but I could be wrong about that one.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that assessment. I definitely think this list is trying out some very cool things.
Yep.
And very innovative. But I worry about it in the mirror. You know, Donald Duck is definitely a liability in the mirror, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because it's so bad against Under the Sea. And then really looking at Zan's list, like Zan's list with the 4 Elegant Spaniels instead of Daisy Ducks and using that to enable the fast Under the Sea Lions. Seeing a build like that makes it, you know, harder for me to be on board with a build that's cutting Miss Park Avenue, because I do think there are ways to make your Miss Park Avenues more reliable and turn them into amazing tools in the mirror match.
Especially since if you play a Miss Park Avenue when you are ahead and you maybe looted something to Bobby, that can almost act as a blocker to Under the Sea because you have a 4/4.
Yeah, and the 4/4 is threatening to eat one of their things if they Under the Sea you.
Yep. Oh, I want to touch on Scrump here. I think the Scrump is mostly just because if you draw it against Purple Steel, you can usually, like, clear your opponent's board against Purple Steel. And, like, sometimes Blurple, I guess, though Blurple has Demonas, so that's a bit trickier.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, that's the reasoning here, is you draw the Scrump against Purple Steel, and suddenly Under the Sea clears their whole board every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Scrump is definitely an interesting inclusion. Definitely makes sense in a build that's so all in on Under the Sea like this one.
And I mean, this seems incredibly like anti-purple. This is almost like the almost like the dogs version of my deck, if you think about it.
Yeah, this is like the dogs list you bring if you're saying, okay, the meta's 60% purple and 15% dogs. I'm not going to play that many mirror matches.
I'm not going to respect the mirror. And I mean, as someone who doesn't like the dogs mirror, I respect this approach, because if you think the dog's mirror has like its pain points and you just know you're only going to play 1 or 2 maximum, even if you make a deep run, why wouldn't you play a deck like this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely very interesting to see. And obviously a couple people had good results with a build like this.
Yep.
So. Moving on to Blurple. So there was a lot of Blurple in Top Cut. 14 copies. We're only going to be looking at 3 of them because frankly, Blurple's boring. Most Blurple lists just look the same. Everyone plays the same 55 cards and a couple of slots for spice. So I don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the Blurple lists too much, but I do think there were a few very interesting Blurple lists, specifically in the Friday bracket. I don't know where this one is from, but I know the other 2 lists were from the UK testing contingent that brought a very innovative build of Blurple. We'll get to that in a minute. First of all, I wanted to look at this build by AYMX, which is pretty normal Blurple, apart from one big change that we're seeing in this list. There are 2 less copies of Genie, Wish Fulfilled, and there's 3 copies of this card, Isis Vanderchill, which is a 4/4 uninkable. When it enters play, you exert an opposing character. She's kind of like an Elsa 5th Spirit, in a way. What do you think about this really interesting change to trim on Genies?
So I actually have a fair amount to say about this because I tested Vanderchill in Steel Purple. So I personally came to the conclusion for Steel Purple that it was rough that your Christopher Robin, your Palace Guards didn't synergize with it. Because you're going to play out your Christopher Robin, and you're going to play your Palace Guard, and then you kind of need your 3-drop to be something that can challenge for it to work with Vanderchill. And you need like... and sometimes you would want to sink Strength with that card, or you wouldn't want to exert it for whatever reason because it couldn't take your opponent's best thing. Steel Purple doesn't have ramp, so it's playing this card a turn later every single time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, however, if you play a deck with Rafikis, we're having a very different conversation. Like, oh, you play Rafiki, you exert your opponent's best, or like, most 3 toughness thing, and you take it with the Rafiki, that's like enabling a really nice, easy trade for you, right? And that can like disrupt your dog's opponent. Say you're on the play against dogs, you play your Rafiki, you play your Sail, then the turn they play, so you've ramped on your second turn, and they've played Willow 1-drop on their second turn. You can play Vanderchill and exert Willow, and just take the Willow with your 1-drop, even if it's Basil. Or like tap Basil or quest Basil, buff your Tipo, take Vanderchill, or take the Willow as well. And that's like some pretty meaningful range. I saw Blurple players were picking up... I need to address something about Blurple. I agree Blurple's boring, whatever, but I saw Blurple players were picking up some really undeserved heat from the community for propping up dogs or whatever. And that annoyed me, because the only Blurpleists I saw doing extremely well were really respectful of dogs, and they looked a lot like this, right? I didn't enjoy that narrative in the slightest. I just want to make that clear.
I will say, looking through the top 32s, there are a lot of boring Blurple lists. I think that's less them being well positioned and more, if you throw enough Blurple lists at a wall, some of them are going to stick.
Yeah, okay, my bad. Maybe I was just like biased because the lists I've seen are like this one and then the UK list.
So, yeah, the one thing I will say is I think these lists with Isis and some of the other cards that we're going to get into when we look at Atlantis' list in a minute, these lists converted a lot better than stock Blurple.
Yeah.
Like, there were not many people playing builds like this with Isis and some of the other cards we're going to get into. And the people who were playing these builds in general did very well.
Yeah. I think
I don't think that's a surprise. They have a better dogs matchup than normal Blurple, right?
Yeah, and you can say something like, oh, if you're on the draw, the Vanderchill is worse, but then like it can also create games where you're on the play where suddenly you're winning those games where you weren't before, right? Because your 4-drop eats their Willow.
Yeah, and you're going to get some games where you're on the play and you go turn 3 Vanderchill, turn 4 Elsa, and you can never lose.
Yeah, the game just ends. I mean, things like this, by the way, are part of the reason I didn't want to play dogs, because like this would run over you, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. Like a list like this, like obviously who's to say who's actually favored overall, but I would be quite scared of the strong lines from this deck.
Yeah.
I would be quite scared to lose the die roll against this deck too if I was piloting dogs.
Yep. They have more things that survive under the sea, so that adds more pressure to find your Della's Lullaby if that's your plan, or find your Chromicon if you have access to it, and then you have to have your Chromicon when you have a meaningful board, and they can't just start turning Vanderchills and Bells sideways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to look at Atlantis' list, which I think is a bit more wild and very cool. Atlantis, of course, top 32 with a build that she'd been championing in the UK testing server. And I love how many cool different things this deck is doing compared to normal stock Blurple. This is the sort of deck where you go, stock Blurple is not doing it anymore. Its win rates are not that impressive anymore. It's seeing a lot of play because people love the deck, but we need to change something if we want to win with this deck.
Yeah.
And the changes here are all really interesting to me. We see these Isises again. We see actually no copies of Genie in this list because Genie is so bad into Under the Sea. And
I happen to know as well, part of the reason there's no genie is just because I think Atlantis and David wanted the lowest amount of uninkables possible for the deck to function, because you have less draw, right?
That makes sense. And unlike Amethyst Steel, you don't really need the questing power of Genie because you're able to play the long game so convincingly.
Yeah, you go far more over the top, so you're not turned into a bad aggro deck like Amethyst Steel occasionally is, right?
Yeah. Couple of very interesting cards we see here. One is second star to the right, the Scourge of Set 9, core constructed.
It's back! I can't believe it. I hate this card. Oh my god.
Oh, I think this card is so miserable to play against and kind of miserable to play with, but boy, is it powerful.
Yep.
This card is so powerful in these purple mirrors. You know, you get to these late game scenarios and then you just draw 5 and you have so many more cards than your opponent ever will for the rest of the game.
I'm very happy I dodged these two players this weekend because they're my friends, but I'm also very happy I dodged them because I think I might have gotten like war flashbacks from having a second star cast against me on Steel Purple.
Indeed. Amethyst Steel, I think, has good game against Blurple nowadays.
Yep.
But I think if they cast second star to the right against you, you might be quite sad about the matchup overall.
I think as well, like, I like a lot of the choices here. You mentioned Genie, them not needing the questing power, but if you play against blue-green or something, you're able to, like, play this Ursula card, and it taps for 3. It's pretty good.
Yeah, Quest for free is absurd.
Oh, Vanderchill as well does have applications against blue-green. We actually notice a lot of these Blurple decks that aren't these odd decks from this weekend. Sorry to interrupt you. We're playing Tigger, where these decks have Vanderchill. And I think, Vanderchill has way more range in being able to take out your Donald Duck if you're playing blue-green. It can take out just whatever utility creature you're valuing, your Moana, your Cinderella. And I think that's pretty meaningful because a lot of the time against blue-green, especially if you play blind, so you don't know what you're mulliganing for or playing for. So you play at your 1-drop, and then your opponent goes develop your brain, and then you're like, oh, fine, they're blue-green, and I've played out my 1-drop, which I kind of didn't want to do. But then you can maybe turn that into, oh, I can take on my opponent's Donald with Isis, I can take on my opponent's Clarabelle 1 that I would never have had been able to do before. So that all feels pretty meaningful to me.
Yeah, I agree. I faced Blurple 3 times across, you know, the main event and side events over the course of the weekend. And 2 of the times I won very convincingly with blue-green. The one time I lost was partly because of Isis Vanderchill. That card did a lot of work to clean up my ducks before they got off the ground and made the cards flow.
Yep, I can imagine.
The final card I want to note about this list, which I think is so cool, Scrooge McDuck, the 6-drop from Winterspell, that says when you play him, you put a card under all your other characters and they gain ward until your next turn. Now, what's so cool about this is it's taking the slot that you would see in other Blurple lists taken up by a card like Wasabi to help interact with Chromicon. You know, your opponent plays out a Chromicon, you slam down Scrooge, all your characters have ward, all your characters get to eat your opponent's characters and not get bounced by the Chromicon because of the ward.
And you played you played a character.
You played a character. And even better, Wasabi, you draw it in a mirror, you're pretty sad. Maybe you can play it out and draw a card of Dombo. I don't know. Maybe you can kill a book if you're really lucky.
Best case scenario, yeah.
Yeah. It's mostly pretty bad, though. You draw a Scrooge in the mirror. You play out a large duck. And you put cards under all your other characters. Your opponent can't interact with them for a turn. And then if they start Let It Going or Hadesing your characters later, you're going to get an extra ink off them because of the cards underneath them.
And you have these magical maneuvers in your deck, so you draw extra if you bounce anything. It triggers your Cheshire Cat. It triggers your Ursula 5, so you can immediately slam Ursula, slam Scrooge, you quest for 3.
Yup. It's a 6 cost for the second star as well.
It
which is amazing.
also fulfills a role. There's a card that's missing from this deck, which is Into the Unknown, which the two of them decided not to play. But if there was someone else on this deck that contributed to this deck, I apologize. I know Atlantis and David played this deck. If someone else played this deck, shoutouts to you. I apologize. I'm not mentioning you. You're not in my head right now. I'm sorry. But what I was going to say was, Into the Unknown is an interesting card in the Blurple Mirror, because a lot of the time, if your opponent's hanging on to some genies or some random 4-drops, or like a Cheshire Cat, you'll be in a position where if you quest your stuff, they get to Into the Unknown you, and it's kind of awkward, because inaction almost becomes the right thing to do. But if you have Scrooge or Second Star, you definitely don't care about Into the Unknown, and Scrooge protects your characters for a full turn cycle from Into the Unknown. So that can be enough to stifle your opponent's tempo, right? Like, your opponent's like, now I'll make my tempo play where next turn I'll Into the Unknown, because you're kind of going to quest, right? But then you put down Scrooge or you sing Second Star, so that you don't care about that Into the Unknown anymore. And I think that's like a very powerful thing in the Blurple Mirror. You have Iago as well. Iago gets protected a bit by Scrooge, and also just Iago's a good card right now. I think I like seeing 4 if you're trying to win Purple Mirrors. I think it's just the right call.
Yeah, people just aren't playing that many outs. And then when they are playing outs, they're playing something like Magical Maneuvers, which, is still very ink efficient, but doesn't get the 2-for-1 that you would used to get out of Hypnotic Strength. So really, Iago is just very resilient right now.
Iago's so good. I played Iago in Sturple, and that says a lot, right? And Iago was phenomenal for me all weekend.
Absolutely. So, incredibly cool, innovative list from Atlantis. Really, makes you sit back and think, hey, maybe we shouldn't take things for granted in deck building. For so long, everyone's just been on 4 Genie Wish Fulfilled, and that card's very good, but you don't have to play Genie. Maybe there's a good reason not to. And we see some excellent deck building here.
I agree.
To move away from that card. Quick look at David's deck list. Not going to spend too much time on it because, very similar to Atlantis's. I just wanted to highlight this Alice card, the 4-drop 4/4 that you can boost, and whenever it quests, put all cards from under her in your hand. Of course, David is also playing Scrooge as well, so Scrooge synergizes very nicely with Alice, turning Alice into a late game card draw engine. Alice is also a 4/4, which is a very hefty body to be playing out to contest the board. So nice to have this card advantage and this, board control in the same package.
Yeah, both lists are playing slightly different cards. I know for a fact that David said he didn't like the Pete.
Yep.
So, but other than that, I think the Alice, he said, was very good for him.
Yeah, he said he might consider a second Alice moving forward. So
very cool.
Cool to see this card seeing some play, because I don't think it's a card I've seen played at all up until now, but it works so well with Scrooge.
Yep, 100%.
All right, Steel Amethyst. I only have a couple Steel Amethyst lists here. I guess we'll look at the other one first.
Because you already covered the best one.
I already covered the best one. But we've got a couple kind of weirder ones that I thought we should take a look at. One thing I will say, you look through these lists from the top 32s, probably over half of them are on Fire the Cannons. Here we see a list from Poi Crew that has, Fire the Cannons, Junior Woodchuck Guidebook, Dolores Madrigal. Very, very different card choices here. And, Fire the Cannons, I have to imagine, is a response to Willow seeing so much play, being able to take out the Willow when you're on the draw, or if you're on the play, you can take out their Willow and develop, say, a guidebook for later. And then, in these purple mirrors, you can always snipe down your opponent's 1-drop to mess up Strength of a Raging Fire maths, which is quite appealing. How do you feel about Fire the Cannons?
I don't like it when it replaces looking for a deal. I don't know. I see the vision. Basically, if you were to tell me, Aska, you're going to a tournament, you're going to play against these dogs players, and they're going to be like good enough to beat you consistently. They're going to be good enough at playing dogs to beat you consistently. Do you bring Fire the Cannons? That's when I kind of start to humor it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But I think cannons, playing more than one copy is a very high deck building cost because it has it's an uninkable, has basically no applications anywhere except maybe against blue-green, and even then it doesn't target the ward Philip, so it doesn't even help you with that. While I respect the players that have made the decision to bring it, I remain suspect of Fire the Cannons in this deck.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I'm certainly not the Steel Amethyst expert that you are, but I do find it interesting, to be playing Fire the Cannons, but not Angel.
Yeah, Angel has so much more range. Like, I drew Angel against Blue Steel in this tournament, and it was phenomenal against Goliath. And, like, I imagine it would have been the same against Amber Steel, right? With a Goliath. But if you draw Fire the Cannons, it's just like, well, okay, I lose, I guess. In the same spot.
Yeah, I also think there are some risks with mulliganing. Steel Amethyst is a deck that has to mulligan quite aggressively because it really wants to set up its curve. It really wants to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop strength. And so you're having to send a lot of cards back into your deck.
Yep.
And suddenly, you can just hit a lot of uninks if you're building your deck like this. But obviously it worked out for a lot of people. I don't want to be too critical. I understand.
Not at all. And I do think one thing that I will criticize is that I don't quite understand why you think you need Guidebook and Fire the Cannons instead of just having Hades and Fire the Cannons. Because if you do have Hades, you have that card draw while also having a card that's good against dogs. Then you're playing a card that's good against dogs and a card that's good against the purple mirrors and some other stuff.
Yeah.
But if you have Book and Cannons, Book's a bit weaker because it doesn't put anything on board. And it's like, maybe they felt like in testing they weren't getting to 5 ink often enough, but then they still have these Demonas, so it's a little who knows?
Yeah.
There is super easily just something here I'm not seeing. But I think the curve is randomly quite low, and,
Yeah, and Dolores is a card that plays well with the low curve as well.
Yep.
So, definitely some interesting stuff though, seeing so many Fire the Cannons, honestly quite a few guidebooks in top 32s as well. The other Steel Amethyst list I wanted to highlight was from the Saturday tournament by Gratch, and this is by a big margin the most wild Amethyst Steel list in the tournament. The thing I wanted to note about this list, we've got 3 copies of Tinkerbell Fast Flyer, and then 3 copies of Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. And, really what seems to be going on here, I have to imagine, is you get down your Tinkerbell. If your dog's opponent ever quests, you're just going to annihilate their board with a Giant Fairy.
Yeah, it's interesting. It also contains Violet Saberwing.
Yeah, which is not my favorite card ever.
But. No, and the one Isma as well. And the one Bell. I like the ideas here. I think the one thing I'd be hesitant of is, does Tinkerbell win you the games that you're losing against dogs?
Yeah, if she just gets bounced by Chromacon, or if you get under the seed and you lose your Fast Flyer.
Now, you're really getting to 6 ink while curving out if you get to UTS. Yeah, that stuff is tricky.
Because I do feel like the games you typically lose against dogs with Steel Amethyst aren't the games where they just play a bunch of characters. They're the games where they play a bunch of characters and they follow up with one of these powerful high variance uninkables in Under the Sea and Emerald Chromacon.
100%. They you maybe can't quest because you're scared of them trading your stuff. And then they play a Chromacon and they quest out, and suddenly it's well, because I didn't create lore earlier in the game, now I can't race them and I can't attack their characters, so I lose.
Yeah. So we have a couple more decks that had a good number of finishes. I have a couple Yerpal lists here. Probably not going to spend too long on them, but I thought this Yerpal list from Luke Smith was very interesting. It has a copy of Stitch, Carefree Surfer in the top end. In fact, there was another list in top 32 that had 2 copies of this card. I feel like this card was seeing almost no play in Yerpal a month ago. It's very, very interesting to see it catching on as an additional source of card advantage. And, you know, a way to really fight these purple mirrors.
I really enjoy how many one-ups this deck has. Oh my god.
Absolutely.
It's great. I while I'm not the biggest fan of Elephant, I think it's cool to see the one bell. That seems to be the card that if you can fit it into your slower purple decks, like if you can fit one copy, it seems nice.
Yeah, I agree.
This deck has an easier time fitting it than Blurple because you don't have any you don't need to fit more Iago outs because you have Horseman Strikes. So there's some nice things going on here for sure.
I also love these Svens. I feel like, you know, obviously Yerpal has a tough time against dogs, but I feel like Sven is one of those cards that can really, you know, catch you up if your opponent's not playing around it.
Yeah, if they do something kind of silly and you flip into Sven and you just start attacking their stuff, it seems kind of hard for them to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. And especially against, you know, say weaker dogs opponents in the Swiss rounds on day 1.
Yep.
I feel like Sven has the potential to really get those players and catch them off guard.
And I think as well, the cool thing about Sven is it does also then do things in the other purple matchups. Take out your opponent's Dumbos and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Another Yerpal list from LDSF Incanux. This Yerpal list is completely crazy. So different to what we're used to seeing. We do still see, you know, the 1-drops, the Willows, the Mowglis, the Evasive Package, the Hades, the Demonas, and of course Horseman Strikes. But we see some very interesting and cool inclusions here in Finders Keepers, the Library, and Raging Storm, which really represents this powerful late game package. Yep. Where, you know, I know a lot of people were talking about Raging Storm in Yerpal when the card was spoiled. Of course, it's a hard card to cast in conventional Yerpal, especially if it's clogging up Uninkables in your hand when you have Demonas. But we see some card advantage here in Finders Keepers and the Library that really ensures you can get to that Raging Storm, and then that when you cast that Raging Storm, you're going to be drawing off your Library to refill your hand as well.
The pattern this deck frequently employs to get to the Raging Storm bit is, okay, your opponent's aware of Raging Storm, so they can't overplay into it. So you play a Library. It's maybe hard for them to kill it because they've not overcommitted into Raging Storm. And then you put and then now they have to quest because you have Demona in your deck, so you can threaten the Demona. And you can threaten the Raging Storm, so your opponent wants some amount of value out of their board, right? So maybe they attack your Library. Maybe they quest, they attack your Library and you have a second Library in hand. Then you just put all your 1-drops into a Library and you trade all your 1-drops into their stuff. And suddenly it's all right, I've drawn 4 cards. Now it's trivial for me to get to Raging Storm, and my opponent has lost pressure because I've gotten to trade off a non-insignificant amount of their board. And if I have a Library, my opponent is not able to just sit there anymore. So this is a scary matchup for a lot of purple decks. It's a tricky situation to navigate because they're not always going to have it. It is really hard to keep this deck in a small game because of the amount of draw they have with the Library and the book, etc., and the Demonas and the Hades and everything. And the Finders Keepers, they're playing so much draw, and the Horsemen. I know I'm just naming cards, but this deck is hard to play against, and I think this deck is pretty nice if you expect the field to be a lot of purple decks.
Yeah, I actually played against this deck last night with Amethyst Steel, and oh boy, it is tough.
Oh, it is unpleasant, isn't it?
Yeah, it puts you in a squeeze, like those squeezes you said, where, you have to respect library, but you also have to respect Raging Storm, but you also want to be questing because of Demona, and it's so many different angles of attack, and really, really cool piece of deck building. I enjoy this a lot, building towards that Raging Storm. Be prepared, it is not, but it is still quite a good card to be playing.
Yeah, I know Fumbles, he didn't make Top Cut, but he played a deck similar to this. Like, he played the Raging Storm Purple and was really happy every time he ran into a purple deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Our final, well-represented deck, we see blue-green. I have a couple blue-green lists here. One is from Bernardo, our teammate, who top-8'd first ever Golden Mickey.
Congratulations to Bernardo.
Big congrats.
Pretty huge. Very proud of him. He did great. He had to, according to him, he had to play out for some really difficult spots this weekend, so big shout out.
Yeah. No, very well earned from him. We actually worked on blue-green together leading up to the event. So his list is, about 2 or 3 cards different from mine. So I can honestly just talk through a lot of the choices here because we were preparing for the event together. Moana is a card we were both very high on. It's, it's ink quite a lot of the time, but then the games where she's not ink, she's incredibly powerful for helping you hit your ink, helping you, get to these large ink counts. You don't always have Clarabelle to enable drawing all those cards, and so sometimes you need other ways to draw cards like Donald Duck or Moana drawing you ink from your yard. Of course, if you have Sail, you get a couple ink. If you have a Cinderella, you get a bonus one. But then Moana also does something really cool where you can ink your copies of your welcome from the yard, and having your welcomes in your inkwell means that when you ink Geyser later on, you're going to draw these your welcomes. And that's really the card you want to draw off of Ink Geyser more than anything, because it lets you just delete your opponent's entire board. So Moana, a card we were enjoying a lot. We were also enjoying Heffalumps and Woozles a lot, just as a card that buys you a bit of time, keeps you drawing through your deck, whilst, especially stopping a card like Pocahontas or the free drop Genie from questing. Those represent so much lore that stopping a single quest there is often just huge.
Yeah, also kills illusions,
Kills illusions, which is huge as well. Like, we were both struggling a bit with the Amethyst Steel matchup until we added Heffalumps and Woozles, and I think that card makes that matchup quite a bit more chill overall. A couple cool inclusions that Bernardo played that I didn't. Spooky Sight, he played because of Ursula and wanting a sweeper that doesn't get hit by Ursula against the dog stack. And then Stopped Chaos in its tracks, I know that he played just as another Your Welcome style effect you can draw off of your Ink Geyser, so that when you're Ink Geysering, you draw, essentially free removal spells from your inkwell into your hand to answer your opponent's stuff. So, very cool piece of deck building here. Definitely, like the changes he's made and the reasoning behind them. Very nice to see a teammate crush it with blue-green.
He did really well. I hadn't actually seen the list, admittedly, because I was very focused on my own little steel-purple bubble. But the list is nice. I think Stop Chaos is an interesting card.
Yep.
I think especially if you play this list well and you're aware of Ursula, you can be inking the Stopped Chaos if you don't want your opponent to get to discard your ink. Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other blue-green list I wanted to look at really quick is from Ed.
Oh, it's Ed's list. Yeah.
Yeah, and the big thing I wanted to highlight here, so his blue-green list is pretty conventional in a lot of ways. There are 2 big standouts that make it different. One is the full 4 copies of Under the Sea, which I think is a great choice for this weekend with the Dogs matchup being so popular.
Yep.
You know, I played 3 copies myself, but we see Ed go to the full 4 because he just wants to be able to find that off vision against Dogs in the late game.
Or be holding a second copy when you get Ursula or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we see Distract, which is his illusion hate card of choice, that also happens to synergize with these 4 copies of Under the Sea. You know, you can shrink your opponent's, Dumbo, or Miss Park Avenue, or Pocahontas, or any of these kinds of cards. And then when you sing your Under the Sea, you're going to get rid of an extra character for very little cost. And I think that's a really cool piece of tech. I know, but it was actually a card Bernardo wanted to test for the event, but did not end up ultimately having time to test it.
I mentioned Distract at some point when I was looking for, should we maximize Under the Sea and Blue-Green? And it's nice to see it doing well. I do think it's kind of nice to max out on Shift Phillip targets in this build, because if you're relying more on Under the Sea, then being able to Shift Phillip, sing Under the Sea, and Distract in the same turn becomes like a semi-realistic play.
Yeah.
And that seems like a good reason to play 4 Shift Phillips. Whereas our team build didn't have 4 Shift Phillips because it's a card that you don't always want to draw in the late game, but if you're playing for these decisive swings and roundabouts against Dogs or Purple Steel, then this makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, it's actually kind of cool. With 4 copies of Malicious and 4 copies of Under the Sea, the Shift combo almost becomes a 2-card combo, because if you've drawn both Phillips, you've probably drawn one of the other pieces as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Looking through, we have 5 other deck lists just to quickly rattle through. I know this episode has been going a bit long, but we have 5 lists here. This is from level 9001, Amethyst Steel Song. A very cool deck. We've got a bunch of singers in, Angel, the Troubadour, Rhino Shift. These singers allow us to sing Akud at Amuti or the Steel removal spells. And then Akud is going to do some sick stuff here. It's going to get down a Bodyguard in Chief Powhatan. It's going to get down an early Stitch or even an early Goliath to delete your opponent's hand whilst you sit there drawing so many songs.
Yeah, this list is nice. I think this was a version of this was on the first decks I built this season. So it's really cool to see Diego building it and doing so well with it. Pretty sick.
Yeah, and really interesting to see the Goliaths. We see a bit of a divide here where some people are doing well with Ariel, the 4-drop, in their deck, but Diego has said, I don't need that card. Ariel's a bit slow. Goliath is an absurd Akud payoff.
I imagine some of the Ariel stuff, playing Goliath over Ariel, if I had to guess, is the fact that Goliath comes down and draws 2 immediately, whereas Ariel, I wouldn't say it's slower, I'd maybe say it has a setup cost.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's also this Akud card, right, where if you Akud out an Ariel, that's good. But Akuding out a Goliath is kind of insane.
It's pretty ridiculous.
It's so huge.
If your opponent stumbles and you do that on the play, and then it's like, oh, I might have to discard to this, actually.
Yeah.
Or at least play very suboptimal.
And a lot of the time, Goliath's going to live through strength, whereas Ariel, that 1 less toughness actually matters a lot when your opponent's going 1, 2, 3, 4 strength against you.
Yep.
We see a blue steel list that is, pretty standard blue steel. A couple interesting inclusions, though. We see a copy of Death.
They love their King Arthurs over there in the blue steel player base.
They sure do.
How many blue steel players have you played against that have one of these in their deck box? Because I feel like it has to be more than one, right?
Oh, I lost to one at the Wakefield CCQ, so definitely at least one.
Apologies.
The King Arthur ruined me. That card was insane.
Yeah.
Kind of a cool inclusion we see here in Desperate Plan, which I think is very cute with Angel, where you get to discard it if you don't want it, or you get to discard your other cards and resolve a Desperate Plan to refuel.
Yeah. I played against a list pretty similar to this. It seemed pretty nice. Especially considering Jasmine's hit rate is just so much higher now.
Yeah, Yeah, Jasmine finding Pete finding Angel is very, very solid.
Also, there's no Cinderellas. I've just noticed. Wow, I guess that's one way to deal with the lower uninkable count, or higher than necessary uninkable count. Just don't play Cindy.
I actually didn't notice the lack of Cinderellas. That's wild.
Yeah, I wonder.
I mean, it's interesting to see the best performing Blue Steel list wasn't playing Cindy.
I guess they're just all in on like Pleakley Tipo or Jasmine Pleakley or something to ramp extra.
Yeah, and I guess they also figure outside of these Jasmines, they aren't interested in the other princesses. We don't see any Mulans. We don't see any Ariels.
Yep.
Ariel 6. So, very, very curious list. Definitely a very different direction from Blue Steel.
Very cool list. I'm the furthest from a Blue Steel expert a player gets, so, you know.
3 lists left. We have Ruby Amethyst. This is the best performing Ruby Amethyst list, and it is so different from your standard Ruby Amethyst list. Normally we see, Dumbos, we see the Challenger package, and we have some of that here. We do have the Evasives and Elsa, we do have the Iagos, but there's no Genies, there's no Dumbos, and there's this late game of Wreck-It Ralph plus Lonely Grave, where you can just sweep your opponent's board, and if you have a big Scrooge, it's even going to survive.
Plus, if you have David Xanatos in play, it might survive, and you might draw a card off everything that dies, which is really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of absurd. This is such a cool direction for Ruby Amethyst.
I imagine part of why you have these Madame Medusas is because with Scrooge and Olaf and Diablo, not Olaf, Cusco and Diablo, you have a lot of ways where it can turn into a quick bounce for your opponent's Willow, so you just slow the game down a beat, and then you try to get to sweeper range. Wreck-It Ralph, notably a sweeper that cannot be ripped by Mowgli or Ursula, because he is a critter. So,
yeah. No, such a cool direction to take this deck in. I kind of want to give this one a spin. I'm not normally a Ruby Amethyst player, but
this deck is nice.
Yeah, I do think, this is another deck where we see the move away from Genie Wish Fulfilled.
Yep.
And I don't know if this is the right way to build Ruby Amethyst, but I will say I don't think it's a coincidence that the best performing Ruby Amethyst deck is not playing Genie at the moment.
I think Aladdin as well is a card that helps your Liquidator quests later in the game. Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some little synergies here. And I really like Liquidator against dogs. It actually does make it pretty hard for them to quest if you have one in play. And then it's nice because you don't have to play this list playing 3. You could play 4 if you wanted to. You just having access to that defensive speed bump is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. You're spending 1 ink on it when you're on the draw, and you almost don't care what it trades for. You're just happy that it's trading for something.
Yeah, since all your other 1-drops you have access to in Ruby Amethyst, like Tinkerbell, sure, but Tinkerbell doesn't survive any trade, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So very cool Ruby Amethyst list. Honestly, really neat piece of deck building here. Penultimate list, we have the single copy of Amber Sapphire, which I assume means this is the one Amber Sapphire player in the room who did not have to face a single Dogs player over the course of the tournament.
Yeah, this list is quite greedy, I felt. Because this is the full disclosure, this is the list I lost to. And I was like, 4 Ohana, okay. 4 Ohana, 4 Stitch, 3 of the 4 drop. Alright, sure. Scuttle. Yeah, okay. So going through the deck list, since Top 32's open deck list, I was very much sure, that's fine. Mufasa was nice and seemed nice in the long game for him.
Yeah, Mufasa does seem like a very nice one against Blurple, where they're inking a lot of your threats and giving you a lot of ink to work with, potentially.
I know something that was a big deck building challenge that we mentioned here a few weeks ago now was for Blue-Yellow was how do we go into the late game and use all this ink that we built up with Moana Cindy, or how many times we've been inked with Let It Go or something. How do we harness it? And then having 4 Surfer Stitch, having 4 Ohana, having especially the Mufasa, Seems like a good way to do that, right? And Mufasa does have that almost kind of Ink Geyser style synergy with Moana, right? Because you put some stuff in your inkwell from your bin, and then you pick it up with Mufasa.
Yeah, you get to recycle maybe your stitches. You're certainly happy to draw those from your, from your inkwell in the late game.
Your let it goes maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Draw that let it go, answer their threat, have a massive lion in play.
Because a few weeks ago we were still talking about how like maybe this like needs Cauldron, and that's a huge liability. And this is a build that does sacrifice a lot in some of the faster matchups, but does also definitely not need a Black Cauldron to win the long game, which is nice.
Yeah, I will say, I would be much happier playing a Mufasa than a Cauldron.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cauldron is such a liability against item hate, and it's so slow, whereas Mufasa is a lot of value up front.
And it goes plus mana, or ink.
Yeah, it goes plus mana, which is awesome. So, well done for dodging all the dogs players. And finally, we have the final deck list, Amethyst and Emerald.
I feel very validated by this list because it means I wasn't the only person to consider putting Mickey, Snowboarder, and Mother Knows Best in my deck for this tournament.
Oh, it's such a rude combo, right?
Yeah.
Shred their hand.
Yeah.
Cool list here. We see the Shift Philip combo.
Yeah.
We see Shift Webergale Vanderquack.
Webergale.
We see these early board stall cards like Royal Guard and Minnie Mouse, and then a lot of card draw to help get you to your shift combo, in levers. We see the levers here, which is not something you see very often, but I think probably the most interesting inclusion to this deck for me. And it's kind of a subtle inclusion, but I think this is just a phenomenal inclusion. Strike a Good Match is maybe the perfect card for Amethyst Emerald. Because the thing about Amethyst Emerald is, the Shift Philip combo is really powerful, but you don't have Vision of the Beyond. You don't have Develop the Brain. You just do not have much card filtering. And Strike a Good Match is not only card filtering, but if you're in desperate need, if you're like, you just need to combo right now, you can even sing it off a Minnie Mouse.
When I built this deck, I found it tricky to get away from your combo-ish cards, like Under the Sea and like Mother Knows Best. So I think it's very apt of you to say that Strike can help you solve that problem, because you do play a lot of conditional cards in this deck, and some of those, by necessity, are not inkable. I also enjoy that the pod has clearly been going on too long because you called it Develop the Brain.
Develop your brain.
No.
I always get that one wrong, to be fair.
No shade. I just thought it was funny.
The pod has been going on quite long.
This deck... wait. I need to touch on one thing about this deck. I'm sorry. I like that this is a green-purple deck that is not opting into fighting over the sky. I think a lot of people, when they build green-purple, they're like, oh, I gotta get my snow forts in there, and I gotta get my Dumbos, and I gotta be able to take over the sky. But in reality, when you play against Blurple, you're not always going to have the opportunity to fight over the sky because they're just so much better at it than you are, because they start from a turn ahead. And so it can end up in a situation where you just want to have Philip and Genie and a bunch of draw, and Webby, ideally, against them, rather than trying to fight over the sky. So I really like this approach. And especially because if you play against Steel Purple with this deck, maybe they take the sky because they strength you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just like the approach of, like, I'm just going to be like a weird control deck, almost.
Yeah, I agreed. Like, not getting into these Dumbo, Elsa wars, just...
This list notably leaving Demona out as well.
Yep. Yeah, just focused on a very different approach, and it clearly worked well for Niels O'Nielsen.
Yeah.
Getting that top 32 with such an innovative build of Amethyst Emerald.
Yep.
Cool. A lot of deck lists from a big tournament, 4,000 players, and been fun to go through them, but definitely ready to have a little break now.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening. If you want to get in contact with us or see any of our social medias or whatever, I am Autumn Lilypad over on X. We also have an Enter the Inkwell account over there. Enter the Inkwell is on, all the different podcast hosts. It's also over on YouTube where you can see the video whilst listening as well. Where can we find you, Aska?
I am first name, last name on X, and I am Gold Sammy on all the other things, including Substack, Blue Sky, that kind of thing. There should be an article coming out. I'm also at Gold Sammy on Metafy. My plan for this week is that there's going to be a sort of Ghent breakdown coming out this week.
Yep.
And then after that, there should actually just be a full Steel Purple guide coming out.
Yeah, I know you have a Steel Purple guide coming out on Metafy that you want to get out before Set Champs for anyone who wants to play Steel Purple and Set Champs and wants to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes, I really want to make a guide that goes into detail about this is the list I played, but you could do these things. There's going to be a lot of information of how to sequence and how to think, as well as just how to build the deck for your specific metagame if you think it's going to be different from mine.
No, that's fantastic, and I'm excited to see your guide and take Amethyst Steel along to one of my Set Champs.
Hell yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and have a great week. We'll catch you soon.
Take care, everyone. Bye.